Hey guys, it's your boy, Ballface8020, back again with another great commentary. So, not a very positive response to my Scott Adams video, and that's okay. I mean, I won't say I'm like, I don't know if I would say I'm bothered by it. I definitely didn't think the response would be as negative as it was. And at least part of it is my fault. I really shouldn't have said the stuff I did about anti-white racism not existing. I mean, I stand by the point that I was trying to make, but it's kind of a separate topic, and I shouldn't have included it in that same video. It's one thing. It's one thing if people don't understand you just because they're too stupid, but it's another thing if they don't understand you because you're not being clear. And I don't think I was really very necessarily clear, like what meant about it. I think the topic itself is kind of prone to lack unclarity, and especially for me, like I've told you guys a million times, my IQ is like 115. So sometimes it's hard for me to verbalize, what I mean. I mean, if I was smarter, I could do better, but I don't always have, I don't have the processing power isn't there to generate the words to clearly express the thoughts. The thoughts are there as feelings as opposed to, concrete, I don't know, thoughts. I don't even know. So I want to, the biggest point that I was trying to make in the video is that I'm sorry, maybe there was like a couple of points. One is that I just completely reject, like completely, that blacks are a hate group, which is what Scott Adams said. I think that's insane. I think he was very wrong for saying that. I think it's just incorrect. I think it's false. I think he misinterpreted that question. I think he misinterpreted the response to that poll. I think what he said is wrong. Not just morally too, but also just factually. I don't think he should have said it, and I disagree with it. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it seems to me like what he was saying in the video, and maybe this isn't what he meant, I don't know, was that you should go out of your way, if you're white at least, I don't know if you're not black or not white, but if you're white at least, you should go out of your way to avoid black people because black people are inherently dangerous to you as a white person. He was going way beyond saying, exercise, exercise, be cautious out there because the world's a dangerous place. And I understand that, you say anything really about race, on like related to what I just said, and tie that to race, you're going to get canceled. I get that. But the thing is, he didn't just do that. He said just avoid black people altogether. And I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm saying that, this idea that like just having any dealings with a black person to you, that for you as a white person to have any dealings with a black person is like such a high level of danger that you're better off just eschewing contact with them like completely is, I think it's crazy. And I don't think there's a problem with it. You can do it if you want to. And if you feel like you're in danger and that's the only thing that makes you feel safer, then I guess you should do it. I just don't know if that you're think your feelings might not be completely in touch with reality, but I don't think you should neglect your instincts or anything. And then also, but and then he seemed to go even beyond that and to say that it sounded like what he was saying is that if you were in a situation where you saw a person who happened to be black and they needed your help, you should not help them. And again, I would say absolutely be careful when you're helping people. And, you know, a person you don't know, you can only go by, you know, what you do know. And part of what you do know is how they look. And part of how they look is going to be their race. And so, you know, no shame in taking everything into account and to being cautious. But that's different than, you know, saying just don't help a person in need if they happen to be black. Again, I would say that you've crossed into like complete lunatic land. And then today, so like Scott Adams has been doubling down on it, and he's saying like is this the first time? I think, I don't know if he said that or not, if it was the first time. He's like, but I've been canceled and nobody's objecting to what I said. They're just saying you're not allowed to say it. They're not disagreeing with me. It's like, which I mean, just tells you like how much of a spurg this guy is. It's like, dude, you explicitly called blacks a hate group. Like, I mean, if you'd gotten on there and talked about anti-white racism, I agree you'd have gotten in trouble anyway. Okay, but whatever. But that's not what you did. Okay. Okay, you didn't even just say anything about non-whites as a group. You specifically said blacks, and you didn't just say I don't like blacks or I don't feel safe around blacks. You said blacks are an anti-white hate group, and that's what you're getting canceled for. Do I agree with him getting canceled? Well, I mean, I don't really think that's relevant. Like I'm not somebody who's going to unperson him. Like I was never somebody who read his stuff anyway. I would say that if I was a Scott Adams guy, like if I was like somebody who watched his streams and read Dilbert comics and stuff, what he said would not change it for me. I absolutely would continue to watch. I would just say I really don't agree with his perspective there. But if I enjoyed his work, I would continue to I would have no moral problem with continuing to support him or continuing to watch his streams. So, but if you're talking about like, should a newspaper cancel him, like newspaper cancel his strip? Yeah, I think yes in that situation, because you're running like a business, and like just because you're paying the person doesn't mean that you endorse everything they say. But I don't know if you can be like running that, like you can be publicly paying somebody who's like openly said something like that. And then, by the way, I would have, if anybody thinks that I'm a sellout for saying that, I've got no problem with that. I would say, I totally see where you're coming from. But for me, yeah, I would say that, I mean, might as well at least be honest with you guys. If I was an editor of a newspaper, I would have done the same thing. I would have immediately canceled the strip. But as for like, should he as a person be canceled? No, I don't think so. You know, again, if I was friends with him, I would still be friends with him. If I liked his work, I would still support his work. I'm even now, and in the video, I mean, yeah, he annoys me. He's a spurg. I don't like spurgs. You guys know that. But I'm even now, I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I don't like what he said. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. So of course he's got the right to say it. But even, you know, the people who I see getting outraged about what he said, like really mad, I don't see any black people getting mad about it. And that's like, you know, so that's like another thing is, it's not black people who are canceling his comic strip. Okay. It's, you know, I don't look like, you see for yourself, you know, go on Twitter, go on liberal message boards and see who's freaking out about it. And they are freaking out. And I don't see any black people talking about it. I don't think they care. I don't think they know who he is. The only people I see going crazy about it are white people. I'm talking about people who are against it, you know, are white liberals. But anyway, there was some responses that or at least one response that I want to respond. I want to respond to the response to my response. Um, this is from Charles Coffey. Well, think what you want, but if you had ever had rocks thrown at you and chased because you wandered into the wrong neighborhood, you might have a different point of view. And this really gets to why I regret so much about saying that anti-white racism is not a problem. I really, because, and I wasn't clear at all, because I absolutely could understand how somebody could take what I said as meant there's no such thing as racism against white people in America, and that's not true. That's not what I meant to say. I agree that it could have been interpreted that way. Maybe most people would have interpreted that way, but that isn't what I meant. What I was trying to say was more as like a societal problem. Like, you know how, and hear me out what I mean by this. You know how like white liberals are always talking about structural racism, about how there's a real problem with racism against blacks in America. And I've said before, I just don't agree. I don't agree with it, period. And I just don't think it's true. And the but when I say that, I don't mean that there isn't like a tremendous amount of racism against blacks out there, because I think anybody who's, I mean, let's just push black people's experience aside, because I don't know much about their experience, but I'm confident that anybody in America who is not black has seen a lot of anti-black racism, probably to the point where they don't even think about it, because it isn't always necessarily malicious. And a lot of the times, like, the people who you see or hear, maybe you're one of these people yourself, say something that is anti-black, or do something like, like avoid a certain area because it's black, or, not like whatever, those same people, whatever, that they don't really have antipathy towards blacks as a group, or have any desire to, I mean, they might have some resentment towards them, but they don't have any desire to hurt them or antipathy. And they probably do have some black people who they like and really admire. So I wasn't trying to say that, so when I say that, anti-black racism isn't a societal problem in America, I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of people who are racist or have racist thoughts against blacks. No, that's not what I meant to say. And and absolutely, as for against the reverse against whites, I would say is even worse, way worse. And so I think here is just more of an interpretation of whether we mean by a societal level of racism. I meant it more as in a structural way, because that's not true. I was about to say that. How about this? I think you guys would all agree with me that there's no structural racism against blacks in the United States. Now, where we would disagree is you would say that there is structural racism against whites. And here it's just more of a philosophical difference. To me, I would say it's impossible if we're talking about structural racism, it has to be racism that's being done by another group. You can't be racist against your own group. Not in internally you can. There's such thing as self-haters. Absolutely, I'm Jewish. I know all about self-haters. But you can't have you can't actually have anti-white discrimination that's implemented by white people. Okay, that's just not logically possible. So if you wanted to talk about structural anti-white racism, that's something that really exists in South Africa or Zimbabwe. I just don't even think it would be possible for it to exist in the United States. However, I do know that there's things you could come back. You would talk about affirmative action, stuff like this, we're going to treat white people last. I get all that, and you would say that, look, it doesn't even matter. For some people would just say, look, it's not even whites doing it, it's some other group. I can't talk about that here. I'm sorry. And some people would say, well, okay, maybe it is whites or whites and some others, doing it, but it doesn't matter because they exempt themselves from it, and it still is against whites. And I think that point is especially legitimate one. It's just a matter of interpretation, and I don't think there's too much point in really debating the minutia of that, because it becomes more about just about how you define things. So I think we can just kind of agree to differ there and let that drop. So that's like what his first part, because I'm sorry, his first part was, if you ever had rocks thrown chased at you because you wandered in the wrong neighborhood, you might have a different point of view. Yes, absolutely. Like, have I ever been targeted for attacks because I'm white, by non-whites, because I'm white? Yes. It's never been physical violence. I've never had rocks thrown at me or anything like that. I've been beaten up, but not because I'm white. I've just been beaten up for a lot of other different reasons. You would never guess this, but I tend to rub some people the wrong way. But no, yes, I have been on the receiving end. There hasn't been a lot of it, largely because, like I said, I don't really interact with a lot of black people or non-whites. It's just my neighborhood happens to be all white. Now, a lot of you guys, it's different. Like, you're talking about, like, he's this comment. He's saying, like, well, if you walked into the wrong neighborhood, I couldn't walk into the wrong neighborhood. There's no black neighborhood near me for me to walk into. So, does that affect my perspective? Well, yeah, it's just, and I do see what you're saying there, and maybe in that sense I'm a little biased. But it's not like, I've never had it, any dealings, with black people. Again, I don't know most of you guys, but I've worked at a lot of places that were either majority black or all black. So it's not like, like I'm totally out of touch, with the rest of the world. But no, and absolutely, I could believe in some places it's worse. And I definitely agree that there's people who've had different experience. I know people who have had different experience with me. I absolutely know people have been beaten up, robbed, raped, or killed because they're white. And I don't deny that. And I really, I think that's a horrible thing. I think that's terrible. One thing though I would have to say on that is there are, and I think that my viewers will be sympathetic with this, there are, if you're going to talk about per capita, right, there are far more hate crimes targeting either Asians or Jews than there are hate crimes targeting whites. Certainly whites suffer the most just because there's a lot more whites than either of those groups. But I think that we would all agree that as deplorable as those hate crimes are, there's no like anti-Asian racism in America or anti-Semitism in America. I think everybody would agree with that. So that's what I meant to say. I think, as usual, people are trying to make a problem out of something that is not really a problem. It is a point. I have, for example, extreme problems with BLM, but this does not mean I hate someone because they have a different pigmentation. Okay, but I'm down with that. BLM. Well, BLM, it's BLM, and I've said this before, I completely, absolutely, positively, 100% reject the idea that the police in America are a racist institution who are abusing or even outright murdering black people in general and young black men in particular. I've said it. I've had a video about this before. I'm not just saying this now. I completely reject that. I mean, not even with any nuance, just 100% I reject it. So BLM isn't for me because their whole thesis is just different. I'm not really anti-BLM though because of how much I hate cops and how much I hate cities. And I feel like BLM has done a lot of damage to cities, and I see that as a good thing. So I mean, so for that, and it's fleeced a lot of white liberal donors. But I hear where he's coming from. I mean, unless he's saying something pro-police, in which case I'm completely against it. But I don't think he is. I think he's just rejecting BLM's main thesis, and I'm with him 100%. But I'm sure you will think I am. Since I am white, you will think I am racist based on this analysis. Well, look, if that's what people got out of it, I think that's really unfortunate. That, I mean, especially you guys who know me, that you would think that I would say something like that. I mean, like I would never. How long have I been making videos, guys? I would never say something like that. Come on, that's crazy. How could somebody watch that video I made and think that I would say something like that? I would never say something like that. I would never say something like that. That's crazy. As for like, would I call him a racist? No, because I wouldn't really call anybody a racist, because I don't think it's a super helpful term. It's too broad for something that can be in degrees, and I just don't know, like it could mean so many different things, right? Like theoretically, let's say there was like, let's say you had like one person of one race, and then his views towards another race is he didn't have any antipathy towards them. He had like no problem with them, but he thought they were inferior. Is that person a racist? And then what if you reverse it? What if you said he didn't think they were inferior, but he hated them? Which one of them is a racist? Both? And neither? And like, what do you mean by racist? And then what about somebody who is like, well, I judge each individual as an individual, but as a group, I don't like them. Like, for instance, me with cops, right? Or me with cops. Or I could say white liberals, but you've heard enough of me speak about white liberals. Let's talk about me with cops. I have no problem saying that the majority, probably the overwhelming majority of law enforcement are good people, and who I would get along with on a personal level, and who don't do anything wrong. Yet I still hate cops as a group, even though I think that the individual cops are fine. And you could say that for a lot of other groups. And then, so if that's true for something voluntarily, like being a police, how much more true would it be even for a race? Or would it be less true? I don't know. Maybe let's just forget about the whole more and less thing, because I don't know. So even if you were, so that's why I just don't think it's a helpful term for discussion. I mean, I understand why people use it as kind of like a shorthand. And I'm not saying you can't use it or there's anything wrong with using it. I'm just saying that I tend to avoid using it due to the imprecision that I think is inherent in the term. So it's not helpful for any type of nuanced discussion. So no, absolutely not. I would not call him a racist. But even if I was somebody who used the term racist, no, I wouldn't, because first of all, I wouldn't do it anyway, because it's not how I talk. But I likely feel the same way you do. I'm not anti-BLM just because I hate cops. But other than that, no, absolutely, I wouldn't say that you're a racist. That's crazy. I would never say something like that. Okay. So, ask yourself this. Do you see race? Yes. Yes, I do. Absolutely. The video was not supposed to be a race does not matter thing. Now, I am biased here on this because, for two reasons. One is, if you followed my other videos, you know I've kind of had that no self experience. It's hard for me to take race as seriously as I used to, because of like that feeling from that I've never totally gotten over, that I don't even really exist and neither does anybody else. So, you can't, so it's if the person isn't as concrete, then it's kind of hard to, take the, any type of racial thing like as seriously as, you did back when I saw things more solid. The other is that I'm a young earth creationist. I know you guys don't like that either, and that's fine. I don't blame you. And, I really don't. But so for me, like, me and like some some pygmy in the Congo, that's like my literal cousin. I view him as like my like physical cousin, and which I'm sure everybody watching thinks that's completely insane. You're out of your fucking mind. It's ridiculous, and and I look, because I would have agreed with you at one time too, and I may be wrong. I'm not, like I've said before, I'm not married to the idea. It's not. This isn't the place to discuss it. But it does, if it is what you believe, it kind of makes thinking of stuff in a racial way more difficult. Or not makes it more difficult. It makes it that it's not as big a deal to you personally, even though it's still a real thing. But absolutely, the thing is, race does matter. For better. In some places, like for instance, race is a real thing physically, but that's not really about. It's not about the physical race per se, because physical race exists in places like Brazil and Puerto Rico, right? But it's not like sociologically, it's not that important. I mean, it matters there too, but not nearly as much, and as it does here in America. Though we don't live in Brazil or Puerto Rico, we live in America. Race matters a lot. And particularly the whole black and white thing matters a lot. So absolutely, I'm not one of those I don't see race people. Do you see gender? Yes, of course I do. I sure do. And anyone who says they do not are lying to themselves. I think that would be true for pretty much everybody that you meet, that they are lying to themselves or just lying to you. I don't know if everybody who sees it is necessarily lying to themselves, because... Well, I do think everybody sees gender. I do feel like when I was, or I do remember this. There was this when I was a really small kid, 4 or 5 years old. I had to take this long train ride, very long train ride, down to Florida to go to Disney World with my family, and this thing literally, I don't know why, but it literally took days. I have no idea why trains are so slow. There's no traffic. It shouldn't take that long. And on the train, there was a black kid who was my age. And, we became friends and we played together, because you're on a train, there's nothing to do. And I don't remember ever thinking, after years later, I thought, he was black, because, I guess, you think he's black just because you don't see people who are black. But I had no, concept of race then. He was just a kid, and, I didn't have any, so even though he was black physically, it just wasn't something that, I registered as an issue. So I do, but now that doesn't necessarily mean that people are born non-racist. It could just be that's because you're a kid and you haven't grown to, totally see it yet. And that's probably most of it, but I don't necessarily think it's all of it. Also, again, I want to talk about people who are experiencing kind of depersonalization and non-self. And if you've ever experienced depersonalization, or even semi-depersonalization like I have, I would say there that, yeah, you wouldn't see race. And you probably wouldn't see gender either, at least to a point. Because you kind of have to experience it to know what you mean, to know it. But yeah, that would be the only difference. But that's not what he's talking about, and I'm just spurring. So we'll continue. I see gender first because I am never going to treat a woman the same way I treat a man. Yes, that's correct. I'm the same way. Then maybe, depending on circumstances, race will come into play. Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Not because of race, but because of culture. Well, they're related. They're related. So, both are the same thing. And I think that he and I are saying the same thing here. So, I am sorry, but I'm sorry you need to grow up if you think the black community does not have any power. That depends how you define it. Exactly. It depends on how you define it. Does the black community have any power over the white as a group? No, they don't. That's crazy. In the United States, absolutely not. Absolutely not. They have some political muscle that they can, carve out some of the stuff to sort of protect their own interest. But anything beyond that is stuff that, it's not them. I guarantee you, take anything you don't like regarding, regarding blacks, affirmative action, or like sort of like this sort of a deification. Sometimes you'll see it to, you know, that's just the best word I can use. Deification sometimes of blacks to a various extent in American pop culture. You know, like some things that, like, you know, when you see stuff like, we're not going to do this because it would hurt blacks or something like that. Everything you see like that, it is not blacks behind it. You know, it's either whites or some other group. You know, but it's definitely any favoritism you see out there towards blacks. It is not blacks doing it. They simply don't have the economic and political power to do it. So, no, I mean, but I mean, do they have like some political power, like in terms of just their, you know, their population, what they can vote? Yeah, but not power that they could use over you as a white person. Now, other people could use them against you. That could happen. But blacks, like I'm talking about the black community in America by themselves, no, doesn't have any power. No. I do not have any power either, but wealthy blacks and whites are both powerful. Yes, I agree with that. You know, what we're talking, I think we're talking here right about, I mean, I have no power. I probably have even less power than the guy making this comment. But we're talking about communities though, right? You know, not individual, I didn't mean to say that there aren't powerful blacks in America. There are. I just meant, does the black community as a group have power in America? No. No. So by your definition, most whites have no power, no matter how much you want to see an imbalance. Well, again, no, I would agree with that. Yeah, I would agree that most whites don't have power. My guess, I mean, most people in general don't have any power. Most people are powerless. That's just, it's always been that way. That's just, you know, society wouldn't function any other way. My guess is, on a personal level, and I could see what you're saying. Yeah, you might say that, because I was about to say on a personal level, a white person would generally, a given white person would probably have more power than a given black person. But, you know, what he would probably say is, well, actually, no, the black person would have more power because of the way society has been set up to favor a black person, an individual black person, regardless of who set it up that way. No, I think that's a good point. It's just not what I really meant by power. And you know, even Malcolm X had talked about this. You know, if you're talking about like that, you know, whatever power that you had in America as a black man, you had that power because it was granted to you by whites. You know, it wasn't true independence that a black person would have in something like, you know, in sub-Saharan Africa. But I say absolutely, I think I see what you're getting at. I definitely didn't mean to deny that. I would say that insofar as there is, like, you do have things set up in the system to, like, show favoritism towards blacks in particular, or non-whites in general, that if I'm being honest, and you guys might have had a different experience, but for my part, it's never had an impact on me. I've never lost a job to affirmative action. I've never lost any spots to affirmative action. You know, that's not me saying it's not a problem. It's not me saying you can't get angry about it or whatever. And, you know, it doesn't have to be affirmative action. It can be anything. It's just not something that really bothers me. But I don't have a problem with people who, who it is an issue for. Dude, I wrote my senior thesis against affirmative action. I used to have a real problem with it. It's just not something I care about now. So, yeah, I really do think that, all the people who disliked or criticized my video or didn't like my video, I think some of it, we're just not going to agree on, and that's fine. But I think that a lot of the stuff, again, I shouldn't have said anything about the anti-white racism, because it's a philosophical difference. It's got a bunch of stuff, things that, even if I wanted to discuss it, we just aren't allowed to on YouTube. I shouldn't have said anything about that. But I think that all of you would agree that blacks as a group aren't doing anything to whites. I think you would all agree that blacks aren't a hate group. I think we would all agree that if you see somebody in need and that person is black, that maybe you shouldn't help them. Maybe there could be a lot of great reasons that you shouldn't help them, and maybe you do need to be really cautious or whatever. But I don't think you would say don't help that person because they're black. I don't. So I think that we agree on way more than I think the people who are coming at me realize. And then he says the imbalance comes from culture, not race. Well, yeah, I mean, and it's not that there isn't an imbalance. It's just about where you put the blame, and I just I think that the things that a lot of you guys are angry and frustrated about, you're just angry at the wrong people. You're angry at I'm not saying you're wrong to be angry. I'm saying that you're wrong, that you're angry at the wrong group. It's not because I just don't see blacks as having enough political or economic power, even cultural power, really. I mean, I know blacks are ubiquitous in pop culture, but I mean, when you hear, it's like some of the more rap, if you hear Dead Prez rap, and they, talk about the rap game as the rap game too, but the rap game in sports and stuff as being a kind of slavery to the man. And you roll your eyes because, first of all, they're doing it. Second of all, slavery, they're making a ton of money and getting a lot of influence. It's like, yeah, but but only because there's white people or maybe somebody else backing them up. And once they pull it, all of it goes away. Like, who goes to rap concerts? Who are the guys? LeBron James has got all this power. LeBron James and Oprah Winfrey, they've got all this power and influence. Well, who does that power and influence come from? Their fans. What race are their fans? White. It's so I mean, Malcolm X or Lewis, let's say it's a guy who really is completely independent of whites or anybody else. Somebody like Louis Farrakhan, okay? He's told all of his influence. He doesn't have any support from whites or anybody else. And how much power or influence or does he have? Now, he's got some money. That's true. He's made some money, but he's got no real wider power and stuff because he was never given it by, the people who really do have the power and influence in society. And that, that's kind of what I was trying to get at. But I also think that, yeah. I mean, well, no, that is what I was trying to get at. And I shouldn't have really said anything about, although I guess it does kind of bleed into what I said about the whole anti-white racism. Again, it's more of a philosophical thing. That's all for now, and I'll see you in the next.